Okay, if anybody's joining me this morning, it's a shame that the link with Ghana has failed. Okay, I'm just. If anybody's. Hopefully people will be picking this up. So Sandra, if you're there, then hopefully you are picking this up now. I've just come over because I'm in a different house. I also have to make sure that I've got a link just to make sure that I am live and I can see myself. It's very scary when you're looking at yourself on YouTube. Anyway, we'll have to sort of wait and see what Jim has to say following on from Haggai. I got a feeling that he was going to go on to talk about Zechariah, and if anybody has picked up on the Grace Church Facebook page this morning, you'll see that my daily link for today is a verse that I think is just so lovely, not by power or by might, but by my spirit, says the Lord. So I'll leave you to ponder that one. It's interesting. I can sort of bring you up to date with things that have happened. Oh, hello, Heather. I can see you're on. That's great. Just to let you know, some of you were praying yesterday for our prayer meeting last night at church. I don't know where you were yesterday, but by golly, wasn't it stormy? Pat and I, we walked down to the front here in Seaford. And the waves crashing on the beach were quite incredible. Really was amazing. In fact, at one point, turned a corner, it could hardly stand up. The wind was so strong. So it's still a bit blowy and blustery last night. But some of you would have picked up the fact that we had a clairvoyant evening at the pub next to the church in town. The cheek. And so for the second time, because they've done it occasionally, they went through it a phase apparently before we moved to the town, but then they stopped. So I'm not quite sure why, but they've started them up again, and they seem to be doing them more regularly. And so we have our prayer coordinator who got us together to pray in the church. And so last night there were 5 of us, which was lovely. And we had a good time praying, singing, worshipping. It also happens to be bell ringing night as well. So the bells were ringing out, and we were praying that those bells, as they rang out, would be striking a chord in people's hearts, really, and drawing them to the truth and to the light, away from the darkness. And Pat and I and another went over to the pub just to sort of have a drink, not to do anything overt, but just simply to go over, just so that our presence is there in the same building, because wherever we go, we take the Spirit of God with us. Well done, Sandra. And so it's one of those things. I mean, there are some people. I've known people in churches, and even I know now that there are people in churches who feel quite happy going to see a medium or whatever. And thinking today is All Souls Day, day when the church often remembers and has lists of people that have died, just to sort of remember them on this day. In one sense, we remember them every day, but All Souls Day is a day set apart by the traditional church to pray for all souls. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat. And so some people feel quite happy by doing that. The thing is that, for those who don't know, I was brought up as a spiritualist, or at least I was brought up in a spiritualist environment. My mother was psychic. So I was brought up with tales of supernatural goings on, really. She used to tell about the sort of people that used to come to her. She was somebody, she never sought to develop her gift. And she said, if it's going to happen, it will happen. when I became a Christian, obviously that caused something of a difference of opinion, shall we say. We always got on, Mum and me. Well, as much as children do. I mean, you know, the teenage years and all the rest of it. But my mum was quite a strong character, and we used to have some interesting debates, shall we say, about the whole thing. But even at the end, she died eventually of a brain tumour, and I always remember as the tumour was beginning to sort of have its effect, she said, I remember her saying to me, just wish you'd hurry up and get on with it. Because the thing is that my mum knew, if you like, where she was going, what lay ahead. She had no doubt that there was life beyond death. And that's sort of hardwired into me as well. As a Christian, it's a very good thing to have that belief in life after death. Because it's pretty fundamental to our faith, really, isn't it? It's one of those things. I always remember a few years ago I was helping out at a radio station, a BBC local radio station. I used to help out on the Sunday morning programme and have fun playing with the knobs and the dials and everything. And one day I was walking through the office, and one of the researchers, who I knew quite well, used to have chats, she said, "Oh, David, would you go on the radio talking about life after death?" To which my response was, "Is the Pope Catholic?" "Yeah, of course I would. Why?" And she told me that they were doing a series with a psychologist going through all the different stages of life. And they'd gone through all the stages of life, and they'd got to the point about what happens after death. And just as a part of that programme, obviously so it was about dealing with grief and all sorts of things, but part of that programme, she wanted to sort of see if somebody from the church would come and talk about belief in life after death. And she'd run round all the vicars in the town, and none of them would. And I just couldn't believe it, because it's something so important to our faith and how we practice our ministry. How can you stand up at a funeral and conduct a funeral service if you don't actually believe that there is anything afterwards? You might just as well say, well, there you are, life's over, so we celebrate what they did in life, but that's it really. No, I wouldn't go as far as a predecessor in one church I was ministering in, though. Sorry, it's early morning. I'll stop those early morning fags. That's a joke, I don't smoke. The predecessor in my church was somebody who, when he conducted a funeral, he'd apparently go up to the coffin, bang the coffin, and says, "It's just bones in here, you know," which I think was slightly harsh. So I think we have to be a little bit more gentle than that. But nevertheless, there is a principle there that once we've died, the body has to be respected. It's done its job for however long, and it is still God's creation, so you treat it with respect and decency. And I've had conversations with undertakers about that, and that's what they try to do. And I remember one undertaker saying that he always sort of treated the person as if it was his own father or mother or sister or whatever. He always used to treat them with that sort of degree of respect, which would encourage the family to know that their loved one is being cared for in that way. But nevertheless, it's the spirit that has left, and it's the spirit which is the reality, that which is essentially us, and so that is the most important thing for us as Christians. Yeah, it certainly is, Heather. I know it was sad, but maybe an indication of the sort of state of affairs, really. But anyway, so there are people in churches who feel quite happy about popping along to the medium. The only problem with that, well, there are many problems, but one of them is that essentially when people start dabbling in those sorts of things and inviting communication with that other spiritual world, if you haven't got safeguards in place, you open a door and you don't know what's coming through. And it is perfectly possible for demons and mischievous spirits to, if you like, pretend to be that loved one that's coming through the medium. So therefore what they say is absolutely spot on. Because don't forget, Satan has perfect knowledge. He knows everything. He has a real grasp of each and every one. Just as God knows us, Satan also has a grasp of us. The difference is that we come under the protection of Christ, and we are covered with his blood. And so therefore we have that sanctification that is over us, and that protection. But for somebody who hasn't got those same defences in place, then the Satan and his demons and mischievous spirits, when the door is open, they can come through and cause all sorts of havoc. You've perhaps heard tales of people who play around with Ouija boards, you know, the old thing with the upturned glass and the letters of the alphabet. Very, very dangerous. And the tales I've heard, certainly I remember even my brother talking about a school he was in where some sixth formers thought they'd have a bit of fun and do it in the sort of the theatre one evening after school. And I think they were a bit scared when this great big sort of movie projector threw itself from one side of the stage to the other. So these sorts of things do happen, and people can allow all sorts of things in, but they don't realise it. They don't know the dangers they're playing with. So it's one of those things that we try to give people warnings to just stay away from it, and yet they'd rather listen to lies than truth. This is the problem. I mean, you know the story about King Saul, who wanted to raise up the spirit of Samuel and go to see the witch of Endor, and she calls up the spirit of Samuel, and his first words are, "What are you doing disturbing me?" And basically he says to Saul, "Well, just as I am here, you will be with me within 24 hours." And yes, Saul is killed in the battle. Very silly man. So it's not a case of sort of denying that these sorts of forces and things happen, but realising that they do and avoiding them. That's the important thing. Whoa, okay, Heather. Taken to a spiritualist service as part of your REA level course. Golly, my word, that's quite something. Wow. I wonder what you thought of that at that time. Obviously it depends on where your faith was. What would I do if I was in that position, if I was a Christian? Would I say, I'm not going? That's a tricky one, isn't it? Golly, if it's part of your A-level course. My goodness. But I wonder if anybody else has had that experience. Wow. I never did RE really at school. I mean, I obviously had RE at primary school, and secondary school RE was more about rugby than religion, because I had a lot of rugby players in my class with me, and the teacher was like the coach to the rugby team, so they ended up talking rugby tactics most of the time. Very strange, but I wasn't really that interested at that point. Although it's interesting that the school that I went on to, secondary school, to do my A-levels, the head teacher there was a reader in the Church of England, and so he had an integrity. And at the end, when we left the school, you know that most schools give out the Gideon's New Testament, which is tremendous. I got my Gideon New Testament from the one secondary school which I left before I went to the A-levels, so I got that. But when I went to the next school to do A-levels, the leaving gift was a Good News New Testament, which was quite radical for the time, really, because I go back a few years, which is quite interesting. I could also tell you the tale. I am rabbiting, aren't I? I could tell you the tale about, I got another Gideon's New Testament that I got when I was in Durham prison. Yes, I was helping the chaplain, I hasten to add, as a theological student. But I think it was about the first time we went into the prison, Durham Prison, which is an amazing building. And the Gideons were visiting as well to give out the New Testaments to people in there. And that same visit, actually, it was quite interesting. There was a big chap who was a head teacher of a school, who was a Christian, who had actually done a marvellous job of turning around the school that he was head of. It was a school that was basically a complete failure, all sorts of behavioural problems. He was a big bloke. You didn't mess with him. It had quite an interesting history, because he'd even auditioned for the part of James Bond when Sean Connery got the job, so which is quite amazing. He went in to the school, and he said on his first day when he took over the school that if you are fair by me and do what I ask of you, it'll be the open hand of friendship. But if you don't, if you misbehave, then it'll be that. He was quite strong, and so he if there was graffiti in the school, he'd get the kids back on a Saturday at the weekend to paint out the graffiti, and they did it. But it turned the school around, and they built up quite a reputation. And he then what he did was he actually took some British weightlifting records for the school and got into the Telegraph as a result.
Jim is on Facebook now.
Oh, is it time?
Yes.
Oh gosh, I'm overrunning. Gosh, don't I wrap it on? Anyway, thank you ever so much for joining me. Oh golly, Sandra, yes, I should pick up on that. I'll say cheerio now, because I don't want to sort of clash with Jim. But it's lovely that you've been able to join me, and I hope I've been able to sort of, I don't know, give you something to think about. So have a nice day and enjoy Jim. I better get back and see what he's saying.